tarot cards are often the first step and basis for a seeker of metaphysical knowledge, like you, to discover your forever path. That could be astrology, numerology, healing arts, or any other spiritual interest you discover along the way. Elaine Ireland is not only a teacher of tarot, she is a mentor who supports you and will be there for you. Visit www.elaineIrelandtarotmaster.com now and discover how Elaine's mentoring, tarot card and psychic readings, tarot card classes, and more help you to grow into the true being you are meant to be. Welcome to Conversations with the Ancients, where you're about to discover a whole different world than the one that, up until now, you've believed you're familiar with. World-renowned metaphysicist, practicing psychic, and tarot teacher Elaine Ireland invites you on a journey where you'll hear voices from the past, interviews with some of the greatest metaphysicians you've never heard of, because in their time, they needed to move with stealth. You'll also meet today's spirit mediums, healers, and others who will show you a side of the paranormal you've never seen before. Be sure you visit our website at conversationswiththeancients.com. While you're there, subscribe to us via your favorite network. Now, hear the words of metaphysicians who blazed the trail. You're not in jail, thanks to them.
Hi, this is Elaine Ireland with Conversation with the Ancients. And with us today, we have Mike Bara, B-A-R-A. He is an internationally known best-selling author, New York Times, in fact, lecturer, right. TV personality, whose books have sold over 100,000 copies worldwide, and I bet you it's twice by that now.
Hope so.
How long have you been writing, Mike?
Oh, geez. 2007, my first book came out, so almost 20 years, 18
and
years.
I have 7 books.
Yeah.
Counting 7 books published.
Yeah, it's good.
I have to ask, did they all make the best-selling New York's list?
No, just really the first one. But we had a lot of help promoting that. So, the others sell well, but not quite as good as that first one.
Just for the public's knowledge, can they get all of those books through something like AOL?
Sure. Amazon.com. Yeah, Amazon.com. Dark Mission: A Secret History of NASA is the first one. And then all my other books, you just type my name, Mike Bara, B-A-R-A, and they'll all pop up. So
I said AOL, didn't I? I meant, you knew what
you meant. Amazon. Yeah, I know. I knew what you meant. I know what you meant. We're both of that AOL age, though, right?
I know. Bring it up, Mike. Bring it up. Of the 7 that you have written and published so far, what would you call your favorite and why?
I think my favorite is actually Ancient Aliens and JFK, because it is. I have a unique perspective on the assassination of the president, the reasons behind it, and it's provable and it's documented, and it involves my pet thing, which is aliens. And I think that President Kennedy was absolutely going to. Did I do that? Can you do that?
I didn't see anything happen. What happened on your end?
Okay, has everything stayed the same on your end? Okay.
Yes, it has. Thank you.
I just moved myself up to the top. I don't know why. I'm used to hosting, so usually as the host, I'm on top. So. And that one, because I can document it. I have photographs. I have eyewitnesses. I can prove there were 2 gunmen. I don't think there were any more than 2. I know who they were. I know what their motives were. And it's fascinating to trace this whole thing about what President Kennedy knew about the alien presence on the planet Earth and what he was about to tell people and why they had to get rid of him. And it got even worse than that, which is that when he wanted to go to the moon with the Russians. And he publicly stated that after privately trying to arrange it with Khrushchev a number of times. And it's within 2 months of him saying that he was going to work out a deal with the Russians, and within 10 days of apparently him reaching an agreement with Khrushchev, they assassinated him in Dallas. And it was, it was all about what they were going to find on the moon, which is evidence of a previous visitation of the moon by some other species, and that had to be stopped.
So do you think that all of the man who killed him pulled the trigger, one of the 2? And by the way, I've always thought there was more than one involved too.
Yeah, there's 2 for sure. Yeah, I think we can prove that there's at least 2. Yeah.
Do you think that the training of that person or both of them had been going on for a long time, just in case they needed to make that phone call and be ready like that?
No, I think they were both assets. They were both CIA assets, and they were both affiliated with the military and intelligence organizations to a certain extent. But no, I look at the assassination as very haphazard, very last minute, we've got to get rid of this guy now. Because what had happened is on November 12th, 1963, Kennedy issued 2 national security action memos, his last 2 executive actions as president. And in both of them, he instructed NASA to set up an office to begin exchanging information with their Russian counterparts. And then he instructed the CIA, director CIA, to inform NASA all about whatever our secret space programs were, any satellites, so that the Russians could tell the difference between our secret space programs and any what he called bona fide UFOs. Alien spacecraft is what he meant by that. So once that happened, and it was a real thing that they were really going to go to the moon together with the Russians as opposed to in competition, they said, we got to get rid of this guy. And there's a memo called the Byrne Memo, which was thrown into a fire by a former intelligence agent. His son or his grandson said, you can't burn that, pulled it out. It's partially burned, but it lists all kinds of things. And it's written in the hand of Allen Dulles. Now, Allen Dulles was the former head of the CIA. Kennedy fired him after the Bay of Pigs fiasco, but he remained in charge of an organization called Majestic 12 or MJ12, which was in charge of dealing with the alien situation on Earth. So in many ways, he was the most powerful person in the United States. But in this memo, it clearly says, we need to decide what to do about this guy, and I need your answer this week. And that memo is dated to late October, early November of 1963. So I think the Kennedy assassination was very haphazard. They looked at, where is this guy going to be? Oh, he's going to be in Dallas. Who do we have in Dallas? We have Lee Harvey Oswald, and we have J.D. Tippit, and we have Jack Ruby. Okay, put them on it. And that's what happened. And that's why it's so sloppy. That's why it's so haphazard. That's why there's so many holes, and why it's not smooth, because they were under immense pressure to get rid of President Kennedy before it became public that we had reached this agreement with the Russians. And that, I think, in fact, it's said that Kennedy was going to announce that agreement at the Dallas Trade Mart at the luncheon he was scheduled to go to when he was shot. Literally within an hour of when he was shot, they say that he was going to announce that they had reached an agreement to go to the moon together, which would have almost ended the Cold War, come pretty close to ending the Cold War. So,
which meant a lot of money would not have been earned.
That's right. That's right. No Vietnam War. A lot of other conflicts would have been resolved. And the primary enemy, the boogeyman that we had to fight. And I'm not saying Soviet Russia was not evil. It was horrifically evil. But I think there was a chance for a rapprochement, then a chance for these two men, Kennedy and Khrushchev, who had faced off in the Cuban Missile Crisis and understood each other very well, to create a new relationship between Russia and the United States. And that was very threatening, not just to the people in charge of the alien question. It was very threatening to the people in charge of what Eisenhower called the military-industrial complex. So that's my theory.
Do you think that Ruby was part of the plan? Or do you think he was individually going to kill Oswald because he had his own reasons? Or do you think he was part of the plan?
Let me tell you this. In the 2017 documents that President Trump released, which were intended to be the whole thing, but have now been held off another 5 years. It was recently another dump, and there's still a few that are still classified, and they're working on releasing those. But in those 2017 documents, there is one where the FBI, there's an FBI document that is reported, sent to J. Edgar Hoover, which says that on the Thursday, a week before the assassination, Lee Harvey Oswald and a certain Dallas police officer, who was the second gunman on the grassy knoll, were seen together in a meeting in Jack Ruby's Topless Bar, his strip club. So, yes, they were all in on it. They were all assets. They were all it could have even been that the CIA asked the mob, "Do you have anybody?" And the mob, went to Ruby, and Ruby said, "I got Oswald and Tippit, and they can do it." And they both hate Kennedy, and all that stuff. There's lots of reasons for their motivations, but
here's another question that I
the
have
document.
to ask.
The document says yes, they all knew each other, all three of them.
Speaking of documents, now granted, things way back when were not as how can I say this, created false documents.
Yeah, it was harder to create. Much harder to create them. Yeah.
Right. As they are today. I mean, today we can even make paper that looks like it was made in the 1700s. We can, then they could not. So that's one of the reasons when you say documented, I trust that time frame about documentation more than I would trust something if it was discovered today.
I agree with you wholeheartedly.
Right. So I tend to lean, I've always felt like there was a lot more to the Kennedy thing than we'll ever know. I was a young woman. I was in my 20s at the time. I remember that day very well. I was downtown working in Austin, Texas. I remember when it was announced over the loudspeaker that the store was closing down, go home, all of that. We've all got those stories. But I remember how dark the time was that day. It was interesting in Austin, Texas. In November, our weather is usually beautiful, not in the hundreds. And within an hour, it was like a whole cloud had come over Austin, Texas. Literally, there was no sun. There was no sun. And this is where he was coming into to have a meal, a big luncheon, a big, that sort of thing.
That's funny. It's almost like, they talk about the crucifixion and the eclipse that happened. Everything went dark after Jesus died. And it's weird. But I do think that things like that, extraordinary things, unexplainable things, miraculous things do happen. And I think this was probably the most significant event of the 20th century was the assassination of the president.
I think it changed the whole direction of the political state. Now, not that another president or something else could not have happened and changed everything, but I think it was one of the major changes in America when it came to politics.
Yeah, I think it was huge. I mean, I look at the most significant events in the last, 2,000 years of human history, and I look at how would the world have been different. It would have been very different if Christ had lived. It would have been very different if Caesar had not been assassinated, and it would have been very different if Kennedy had not been assassinated. And I see those as the three pivotal points in human history, human consciousness in the last 2,000 years. And I because I think that absolutely that we were on a path with Kennedy to peace with the Soviet Union, to an end of the Cold War, which contaminated us and our body politic for the last 50, 60 years. So,
do you think someone would have come behind him and destroyed all that? We're seeing how easy that can be done. Way too easy.
I think Nixon would have been the next president in any event. I don't think LBJ, he wouldn't have had the problems that he had, but LBJ knew about it. He wasn't the planner, but he knew about it. I mean, I've got a photograph of the motorcade, by the way, where Kennedy's been hit through the neck, but he hasn't been hit in the headshot yet. And if you look back 2 limousines where LBJ is, you can see Senator Yarborough, Lady Bird Johnson, and LBJ is nowhere to be seen. He's already ducking. And this is when nobody even knows there's been a shot yet. The Secret Service is kind of looking around. What do they hear? But nobody even knows. He knew the shots were going to start happening as soon as they rounded that corner onto Main Street from Elm Street. So, he was in on it. But I don't think LBJ would have had any chance really of beating Nixon in 1968. He was such a miserable, unlikable, dirty, corrupt person that I think Nixon would have beaten him anyway. And things would have been drastically different. There probably would not have been a Vietnam War to split the country apart. And so Nixon would have been inheriting a different situation than it turned out to be.
Living here in Austin, we knew a lot about the politicians involved because they walked the same grounds we did.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, Lady Bird Johnson and President Johnson, we'd all seen. I mean, we would see them and their security people around
Yeah.
walking the streets. We didn't have
Yeah.
big shopping malls and things like that. And my mother happened to work in a hotel that where everybody stayed. You've probably heard of it, the Driscoll Hotel. That
Mm-hmm.
was downtown Austin. We didn't have all the big fancy things that we have now, but that
Yeah.
was the fanciest in Austin at the time. Everything happened downtown. So, and downtown restaurants. And you saw both the pleasant side, signing autographs, shaking
Mm-hmm.
hands, taking
Mm-hmm.
real pictures with people, not
Yeah.
selfies. Not that that's not a real picture, but you also, at the right place, could walk by a serving table and hear conversations.
Mm-hmm.
And if you saw the security guards walking toward the table, you knew not to hang around, to go.
Yeah.
And at the Driscoll, there's always been some sort of earplug, always, even if it was the cotton balls. But during certain times of the days and certain parts of serving, even if it was what they call the inner bar upstairs, where the public was generally not invited,
Mm-hmm.
the servers were asked to wear earplugs. I know.
Yeah.
So they would yes, they'd take your order and then they go away. They wouldn't hang around.
Yeah.
And there was so much that was going on at that time, but we all knew that I can't speak for everybody, forgive me for that, but most of us suspected that President Johnson would not run for a second term. It was
Mm-hmm.
just a feeling. We felt like he stepped into more than he realized, and he didn't want to be part of that in the long run and in history. So it was not a big surprise to us here that he stepped aside and used his distaste for killing young men in Vietnam.
Yeah.
We said, oh no, yes, we knew he had heart, but at the same time, everybody I talked to as a civilian just felt like, no, there's
yeah.
more,
well,
more.
things had gone very bad for him. He was blamed for the escalation of the Vietnam War, which he did escalate the
Yes,
war
he did.
at the behest of the bankers and the militaries who controlled him and knew all of his dirty secrets. And, so I think his choice was to step aside rather than face defeat. And I think there's a reasonable chance he would have lost to Nixon. He wasn't, in spite of winning massively in 1964, Nixon was seen differently than Goldwater. He was seen as rational, calm, tried and true, nearly won in 1960 and possibly did win in 1960. Even Democrats acknowledged that there were some shenanigans in Illinois and Texas, but who knows? But I think that he kind of could see the writing on the wall, and rather than face the humiliation, he decided not to run. And also there's a sense of clearing the karma. I mean, I've had channelers, people like you that have your kind of skill set, that tell me that he did not die of a heart attack in 1970, that he took his own life, that he shot himself in the head. And that was part of the karma over the guilt he did feel about murdering President Kennedy. And I think once he got into the White House, in spite of some of the really awful things he did, I think that he realized that he should not have done that, and that he should not have been involved in it. And in spite of the power that he craved, and the everything that he wanted, I think he realized that killing Kennedy had been the wrong thing to do. And so there is the old thing, Elaine, that if you got a lot of bad karma, if you take your own life, it kind of makes up for some of it. And you can minimize the karma that you experience later on by doing that. So
that's the individual, but it also teaches people, I believe, now this is just my belief, it teaches people to watch their own actions.
Mm-hmm.
When you see someone like that. Speaking of the Kennedys, and his brother was in the process of running at one point and was killed by Sirhan, right?
Yeah, Sirhan, yeah.
Yeah. do you think that was a continuation of keeping the Kennedy family out of the White House
Yeah.
by the
Yeah.
same group of people?
Yeah, by the same or similar or related group of people. I don't know as much about the RFK assassination. What I will tell you about it that I do know is I think a lot of the questions are a little fanciful. I think whatever Sirhan's motives were, when people say, "Oh, there were two shooters," Sirhan didn't kill him. I think that's batshit crazy stuff. Sorry, am I allowed to swear? Sorry. I think that's crazy stuff. I mean, because it happened right in front of everybody. He stood right in front of him. He shot him he had 9 shots, I think, in that revolver, or 8 shots, 22, and he just shot him in the head over and over and over again. So, I do think he was probably a little bit programmed, or he was working for them, MK Ultra, whoever. Yeah, that was a real program that existed, and there's still people today that are manipulated by it that I personally know. So I think that some of those are a little fanciful, but yeah, we are not letting this guy back into power, because Robert F. Kennedy would have done some of the same things that Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is trying to do, which is to expose the non-government organizations, the corporate corruption, the pharmaceutical industries. I mean, RFK would have had a different agenda because it was 1968 and not 2024, but it would have been the same kind of thing. And they're also really afraid he was going to dig into his brother's murder. So I believe that's absolutely true, that the same people needed to make sure he didn't get into office either. So
and you notice that not too many other Kennedys have reached for higher station, except the one that is in a higher station at this point.
President Kennedy got elected. He got murdered for what he was going to do in office, which is to tell the American people and the world the truth. I think about aliens and many other things. His brother was murdered when he tried to step into those shoes. Ted Kennedy, kind of did it to himself. He was never up to his two brothers. He was never up to their level. He was never going to be what they were. And then John Jr., and I believe John Jr. was either murdered or I think it's very plausible that he faked his own death and he's actually still with us. I think there's a lot of reason to believe that. So we're going off to a tangent here, but I think it's questionable. I think it's questionable whether he's really, John Jr. is really dead.
But what about the girls?
What about them?
Would they be in the water or somewhere else?
Well, okay, in 2017, President Trump's first year in office, there were rallies that he held. He continued to hold the rallies to promote his legislative agenda, right? And there were ones that took place in Pennsylvania and Ohio and places like that. At the Pennsylvania rally, seated very specifically over his shoulders, his left and right shoulder, were a woman and a man. And the man is been identified as a gentleman named Vincent Fusca, who I know, I've talked to. And he bears an uncanny resemblance to John F. Kennedy Jr. if John F. Kennedy Jr. wore a hat and had a sloppy, scruffy beard and wore glasses. And what I think is that this was not Vincent Fusca. This was John Jr., who was a trained actor, by the way, dressing up like Vincent Fusca in disguise. And the woman on the other side, so you're looking at Trump and you've got this JFK Jr. guy over one shoulder and this woman over the other shoulder, who is the spitting image of Carolyn Bessette Kennedy, right down to the little notch in one of her teeth when she smiles. And there are people who've done lip reading on their conversation. And their conversation was along the lines of, look, you're up on the screen. They can see you, she says to him. You're the star. And he draws out a star. So the lip reading is correct, right? He draws out a star so the camera can see it. And then she says, you're the junior. you're the star. And then he writes out JFK Jr. Now, I will tell you this. That is not accidental. That is not Vincent Fusca, who is a very nice man and patriotic, and who was at the Butler assassination, by the way, behind the president, interestingly. That's somebody trying to convince whoever is paying attention that they are John F. Kennedy Jr. and Carolyn Bessette Kennedy. And later at other rallies, because they appeared in 2 different rallies, the woman who looks like Carolyn Bessette, and I can show you the pictures. They're amazing how accurate they are. She's wearing a ring that is a ring that Jackie Kennedy wore in the White House. It's like a ruby ring with certain diamonds around it. She's wearing the same ring, which she would have had if her husband, the son of Jackie and John, had given it to her. And there are all these other little things that add up, which are pretty amazing. When you take John F. Kennedy Jr.'s face and you overlay it to this guy who's playing Vincent Fusca, they match perfectly. Now you can have your chin altered with plastic surgery. You can have your ears altered. Okay, they can do a nose job on you, but things that they cannot change are the proportion between your mouth and your eyes and the separation of your eyes, and they are exactly the same. So there's even pictures of this guy, Vincent Fusca, being interviewed, because he's a big Trump supporting patriot. And they show him holding his hands, and he's crossing his hands exactly the way John F. Kennedy Jr. used to. His mannerisms are exactly the same. Now, the difference is Vincent's about 5'8", and JFK Jr. is about 6'2" or 6'3", but there's no way to tell from these pictures whether the guy at the rally is that tall or not. Then there's video that was taken that's out there that's from before the rally starts. And you see, let's call him JFK Jr., coming in, sitting down next to Carolyn. They're in their 2 positions over Trump's shoulders, and they start talking. And he gets up and goes to the men's room or something. And a Secret Service agent, a man who's clearly a black Secret Service agent, comes up and sits down next to Carolyn. And they're talking. And she says, yeah, he's going to be playing Vincent Fusca at some more rallies. And the Secret Service agent goes, well, where? And he goes, oh, well, Ohio. We're going to be going to Ohio, the 2 of us together. And then we're going to be going to Florida and yada, yada, yada. Now, I interviewed a guy who was the head of the Trump campaign in Pennsylvania in 2016. And I said, do you know that guy that's talking to her? And he goes, yeah, it's a Secret Service agent. His name is Joe Blow. So I know that was and the conversation is all in the context of this guy is pretending to be Vincent Fusca, and they are going together to Trump rallies. So the question then becomes, to what end?
Yeah.
And here's and the thing to remember is Junior and Trump were friends. They were friends in the 90s. They hung out together. They went to ball games together. They knew each other quite well. And if John F. Kennedy Jr. said, they're trying to kill me, they don't want me to be president, because he's going to avenge his father's death, who would be in a better position to protect him and give him a secret life and help him fake his own death than a guy who at the time was worth a couple $2 billion, Donald Trump? So I have this weird feeling that there is some connection there between them. And they both apparently want the same thing, which is to get back at the people who killed President Kennedy. Because I also understand Trump was a big President Kennedy supporter. But that was a lot, back in those days. So
that was another lifetime ago.
Yeah. So, but I mean, all this, I really didn't put this in the book. Now I need to do a new edition of the book with all this extra stuff in it, right? So there's all these connections that are just not explainable, Elaine. It's not explainable. I mean, this guy, his facial structure is the same as John F. Kennedy Jr. If you took Jr. and Carolyn and aged them forward 20 years, which is what it was, 1999 to 2017, they would look he looks exactly like a 58-year-old JFK Jr. would have looked. She looks exactly like a 58-year-old Carolyn Bessette Kennedy would have looked. And then there's other people in the crowd. There was the sister, Lauren Bessette, was supposedly with Kennedy Jr. and Carolyn when the plane crashed.
Right.
And you look over to the left, and she's in the crowd too. I mean, she has this very prominent cleft chin, and there's this woman who looks exactly like her, but 20 years older. And you're just like, what the hell is going on? But when I see that, things like that just convince me that being a conspiracy theorist, such as I am, is absolutely true, because there is something going on, and there is a war happening behind the scenes, a geopolitical war that's going on between one side and the other. And I'm not going to call one side the good guys and one side the bad guys, because I don't think we know who that is. But definitely there is a war going on in our body politic that we generally do not see. And you have to look and pay attention. But there's no question that them being placed right there. And again, I talked to my friend Dave, who was the campaign manager for Pennsylvania, and he said, absolutely, those people are handpicked to be placed behind the president at any rally or behind whoever the candidate is, whether it's Kamala or Hillary or anybody else. Everybody is handpicked to be in those exact seats that they're in. So somebody went out of their way to convince somebody else that John F. Kennedy Jr. and Carolyn were still alive. Just, there's so much more I could tell you. There's so much more.
It's just a conversation. It's interesting that would happen, knowing that people will notice the same thing that you did, and wonder about it and not draw attention to it publicly. That could damage the following of Trump, because those were Democrats and that was the Kennedy family. So there is some wishy-washiness, but everything you're talking about brings me to one of your topic takeaways. All forms of government are corrupt because they inhibit the free will of man and the global sovereignty. I said that wrong.
Sovereignty.
Thank you. And my degree's in English, right? Movement cannot be stopped.
Hey, look, Elaine, at my age, there's certain words I don't pronounce as easily as I used to. The brain just doesn't function quite as well. So
no, wait a minute. I'm old enough to be your mother. Watch what you say about age. Come on.
I'm 65. Okay, so, come on, you're not old enough to be my mother.
I'm 81.
Unless you were fooling around when you were 13.
I'm 81 years old.
You're 81. I would never have guessed that. Wow.
Thank you.
I would never have guessed that. I would have knocked 10 or 15 years off that. Wow.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
But that's why I keep going, because you keep going. Use it or you lose it, right?
Right.
Yep.
That's how Bill Shatner is still around. Captain Kirk. He just keeps moving forward and doesn't stop. And that's how he stays alive, I think. So,
I'm so glad you brought him up, because you got to work with him.
A little bit. Yeah.
Yeah. I wanted to bring that up a few minutes. There is so much to bring up about Mike Bara. You must go read his bio. We can't do it all today, but I do want to hit some of the really, what I think are really some of the fun things. He's been a featured guest on the radio programs like Coast to Coast AM with George Norrie. I'd say his last name too, Noory.
That's correct, Norrie.
He's been around forever and has talked to some of the best. So kudos for you. He's a regular contributor to the television programs Ancient Aliens, over 50 appearances. I think I've seen a dozen of those. I catch you every now and then and record them. I record that series, so eventually I'll see them all. America's Book of Secrets and Hangar One. I love it. In 2014, you starred in an alien investigation reality show for Discovery Network called Uncovering Aliens. I haven't seen that one.
It's good. It's on YouTube. You can still find it.
Okay. And Uncovering Aliens has been shown on the Science Channel, which is a big deal. And the Animal Planet, another big deal. But I'm looking for William Shatner. There we are. American Heroes and Destination American Networks, and is being shown extensively in Europe and South America. In the last few years, you have appeared on Unexplained with William Shatner. I love that show, by the way.
Yeah, it's a good show. It's a good show.
You've appeared on a featured expert a featured expert on UFOs, the lost evidence for the Travel Channel.
Mm-hmm.
In 2019, you played the conspiracy theorist, there it is, in the Science Channel series Truth Behind the Moon Landing. That's another one we could have a whole 5 hours.
Even though I know we went to the moon, I played the crazy conspiracy guy. So,
Okay. Frank,
right.
you appeared on NBC, Universal's Sci-Fi Network on the special Aliens on the Moon, The Truth Exposed, alongside NASA astronaut and American hero Buzz Aldrin.
Yeah.
The show was based primarily on your 2012 book Ancient Aliens on the Moon.
Yeah, which is
Yay, Mike Bara.
Somewhere. It's on that shelf, like right there.
You know, Mike, Shatner. Yeah. Now I'm looking at this from a spiritual point of view, okay? Not a science point of view, spiritual point of view. Yes, he's an actor and he's involved in all of this. But as a spirit in what I call the walking skin, in body, having the experience on planet Earth, I find it fascinating that he got to play as an actor, someone who was hundreds of years in the future. And now he is associated with shows that not only look to the past historically, but they also look to the future. I can't help but wonder if he's not one of those aliens that are somehow here to keep the public's attention on the possibility, well, now we know the absolute ability of space travel via the entertainment world, which we know entertainment has been a way of introducing a multitude of things.
Yeah.
And every time I read about a medical improvement or a new gadget that they're using, I go back to Star Trek.
Yeah. Or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. I think, well, somebody thought of that 50 years ago.
Yeah, I love how they flip open their cell phones to communicate with the Enterprise and, and then they scan stuff. And it's basically all this. You know, they had 3 different instruments, but it's basically the same thing.
I'm going to take a minute here of your time, and I'm going to share one of my favorite shows about Star Trek. Somehow they got planted back here on planet Earth, and I don't remember the storyline. I just remember these scenes, and it was Shatner, it was Leonard Nimoy, and it was, of course, the Doc. And then there was another person. There were 4 of them. And they were discovered as being not aliens, but intruders in the hospital. They didn't belong there. They didn't have the right badges. Yeah. And they're running down the corridor to get out. And there were patients everywhere. Everywhere for some reason. Maybe there was some sort of whatever you call it going on. But there were patients everywhere. And there was this old woman, bless her heart. She could barely lift her head up, and she was in pain. And every time a doctor or a nurse would go by, and you'd seen this throughout this show, she'd try to get their attention, and everybody was so busy. But when they were running out, the doctor had his little thing in his hand, and he's literally healing people as he's going out the door. Right? Yeah. He's not even stopping, but he stops with her, and he's very compassionate for just a split second, and he says, be still, something like that. And he hits her, of course, right here, and she's not only going backward in age, just a little bit, but Shatner gets impatient, and he's saying, come on, and the doctor says, it's just cancer, I took care of it.
Yeah.
And I'm going,
I think that was actually the movie Star Trek 4. And
was it the movie? Okay.
Yeah, it was one of the movies. And she said, I think it was he said, what are you in for, sweetie? And she says, oh, I got kidney dialysis. And he goes, dialysis? And he hands her a pill and he goes, here, you take one of these and you'll be just fine. And then later on, as they're racing out of the hospital, you see her, they're wheeling her through and she goes, I grew a new kidney. Yeah. So yeah, that's McCoy, that's
I loved it. But every time I hear about, or I have to say, talk with somebody medical that I've had the pleasure of talking to some people who have actually developed. We're in the process of doing lab work and developing major machines that are now used in hospitals.
Yeah.
And they come to fruition. And the last time I got an MRI, I could not, well, several MRIs over the last couple of years, but I had this, I was laying there thinking about having an association with one of the people that worked on an improvement for
Mm-hmm.
the MRI machines.
Yeah.
And working with what they're calling the stand-up machines now.
Yeah, so you don't have to be in that tiny, tunnel
Right.
thing. Yeah,
Oh,
where you feel it. Yeah.
I'm mostly claustrophobic, so that drives me nuts. But I do it anyway because I got to do it. But I couldn't help but think about the people that I've talked to in the medical industry, that they also go back to the Star Trek stuff and
Yeah.
other science, what we call fiction, that actually comes to reality. It's amazing.
I'm going to go a little off the subject and then come back to it here.
That's okay.
So I was told, by people in my mercy circle around 2010, 2012, 2013. Are we connected? You're frozen. Am I frozen?
You're frozen.
I don't know if I'm frozen.
But I can hear you.
One of us has a bad connection.
Okay. But we can hear each other, and that's
we can hear. Okay. So, all right. So that's good. All right. So that the military was ready to stage a coup. They were like, this country's completely out of control, and we're ready to stage a coup and arrest everybody in Congress and the president and everybody because they're all corrupt. And they said, okay, but if you do that, and there's rumors that there's time machines out there that you can see what happens. If you do this, this is what happens. And they said, okay, look, there's three possible futures that we're looking at. We fall into complete tyranny, 1984, and we lose our humanity. We can do a midway thing where we control everybody and everybody does pretty well, which is kind of like Agenda 2030, where you will own nothing and you will be happy, kind of a thing. Or there's the Star Trek future. And my understanding is around 2010, 2012, around the time the Mayan calendar flipped, they chose the Star Trek future. So the Star Trek future means you're going to be able to eat a steak without having to kill an animal. It's still going to be a steak, but you're not going to kill an animal. It's going to taste delicious. So the cows, who are feeling sensitive, sentient creatures.
Yeah.
And I love my steak and I love my wings, but I don't want to. I'd rather not be killing animals to eat them. And by the way, God, you suck for making it so that we have to eat something that died to survive. I hate that part of this existence.
I know, I'm a vegetarian as well. So,
well, I mean, but even then, look, in one of my books, The Choice, the plants, when they know they're going to be harvested, they feel fear also. They get terrified. So, they're just as conscious as anybody else. And we can talk about that in a minute. But the Star Trek future involves new medical innovations. And I'm like, okay, so you hear about these things that they're calling med beds, which are supposedly they're able to scan you and they read your DNA and they say, okay, these things are haywire in your DNA and we're going to fix them. And you can fix them, and then you can suddenly become the healthiest 81-year-old or 65-year-old you could possibly be. You look better, you feel better, your skin, everything looks better. You probably look 10, 15, 20 years younger. Supposedly with this technology, there's another level where they can say, okay, we can also age you back 30 years if you'd like to be 35 again, Mike, which I would, and be 100% healthy at 35. We can do that. And okay, so that may not be for everybody, but some people are going to do that. And then there's even more advanced technology, which supposedly comes from aliens, which is that you can live forever if you want, and you can change anything about yourself that you want. You can become a Ken doll or a Barbie doll. Personally, I don't like that future because I think we all chose to be who we are in this lifetime for a reason. I would love to be the best Mike Bara I could be, but I don't want to be somebody else. But those technologies exist. And I'm like, okay, that's really fanciful. It's really cool. And I asked some people inside that know a lot about the financial changes that are coming that you and I have talked about. And he said, no, there's no such thing. There's no med beds. But what they're going to do is they're going to be able to like take your blood and run it through an AI machine, which is going to analyze you and figure out everything that's wrong, and then change your DNA so that all that stuff is fixed. And then they just pump your own modified, perfected blood back into you, and you get better. And over the next couple of months, you feel better, you look younger, you look 20 years younger. And I'm like, what's the difference? Because I think that's the cover. I think that these med beds do exist, and they are going to change everybody's medical conditions if we can all live long enough. Let's pray we all get there to when they finally release this stuff. And they're just going to call it, oh, look, Elon Musk used AI to invent some new healing machine that's going to make everybody look 20 years younger and feel 100% better and cure cancer and all that stuff. I believe that thing is coming. So I'm like, okay, that's all fascinating. That's good. So then just the other day, I have a friend who said that he went to the doctor. He's a very close friend of mine, Jim. Jim here, he lives in Vegas. And he has a poker game with some ET techs and some doctors, among other people. And without him prompting at all, his buddy, the doctor, brings it up, the EMT, not EMT, but the emergency room doctor, brings up and he goes, we're starting to hear these rumors about something. And they're calling it like a medical bed or a med bed. And he goes, and we don't know what it is, but our hospital is looking into investing in this. And Jim knows all about this stuff. And he goes, oh, really? What are they telling you? And he goes, well, they're telling us that they'll be able to like fix any ailment and they'll sort of restore you to you'll look younger and you'll feel better, and it'll take 20 years or 30 years off your life. And then one of them said, yeah, and then they've got this other one that supposedly can make you like almost like Superman, like you'll feel 1,000,000 times better. That's called he said that, I forget the name of that. He goes, it's called like a millennial chamber or something like that. And that's what I've heard 10 or 15 years ago is the so-called celestial chamber. So he didn't have the word celestial. He didn't catch that. So here's the reality. This technology is now reached the point of people in hospitals are now thinking about investing in this technology. So that tells me that this technology is real and that it's coming. Fortunately, I think what we need the financial reset to pay for that stuff, to get it out to the public. The financial reset has to come first, and then the medical stuff comes. And once the medical stuff comes, then guess what? We can all live very long, very happy lives. We can live as long as we want. We can choose to go home when it's time to go home, not when we get an illness, we can cure those illnesses. What would it be like to live 200 or 300 years? They say some people say, oh, you can only go back 30 years. You can go back 30 years, but you can only do it 3 times. Like I can go from 65 to 35 3 times. After the 3rd time, my brain starts to turn to mush. And
unless they fix that.
Unless they have a new technology, but in another 90 years, right?
Right.
So,
which wouldn't surprise me at all.
But think about that. Like I've been married, but I never had any kids or anything. So I have this obsession with doing the things I came here to do, with a certain amount of prominence, with teaching and getting information out to people, and introducing the fact that we're not alone to people, alien stuff, and exposing corruption and telling people the truth about the way we've lived for the last 2,000 years in the occulted age of Pisces, and bringing us into this new world. But that might take another 30 years for me to do that. But then after that, Elaine, why do I need to keep doing that? I mean, if I achieve that in the next extra lifetime that I'm given, the extra 30 years of life, then why couldn't I say, well, after that, you know what? I'm going to go find a young girl or a girl who's been aged back, why can't I just drop out of the public life and go get a ranch somewhere and raise a family? Because I haven't done that in this lifetime, because I can't do both. But we're going to have, when this technology hits, we are going to have the option to live 2 or 3 different lives in the same body in one lifetime.
Now all we have
paralysis and nothing. Go ahead.
Now we have to make sure that the planet, this planet, if you want to stay here, is going to be able to support that.
Yeah.
Or we're going to be able to go to another planet and do that.
Exactly. Well, so what do you see happening elsewhere? You see, what does Elon Musk keep talking about? He's obsessed with going to Mars and starting a colony on Mars. And Mars, by the way, used to be just like Earth, used to be a beautiful garden spot. But, without getting into a lot of complication, it was not a planet. It was a moon of a much larger rocky planet that either blew up or was blown up and devastated it. But we can reclaim Mars. There's water there. I told you that 25 years ago, me and Richard Hoagland, my partner. There's water there. NASA now says, well, there's a lot of water there. You should have asked Mike Bara 25 years ago. I would have told you that. But all we have to do, Elaine, is send what they call lichens, which are basically just little plants that suck up as much carbon dioxide as they can and pump out the oxygen. Just send them to Mars. And in 100 years, Mars will be just like the Earth.
I have always felt like there was a culture, and people don't fight with me about this, people. Don't send me ugly notes, please. I've always felt like the inner part of the moon was where what we would call people are life beings. I've always felt like whatever happened on the surface, survivors went underground, and that there's a tremendous amount of water. It's like Earth turned folded in, if you want to call it.
There were oceans on the surface, and when the cataclysm hit, the planet exploded. It was a tidal locked moon. In other words, you know how the moon always shows the same face to the Earth? The Earth is spinning, but the moon always shows us the same face. It was the same thing with Mars. The explosion happened. The water, which was gravitationally locked to this gigantic planet, was released. There was catastrophic flooding. It froze over. It was covered with dust. But you're right, there are underground civilizations. In fact, I can show you some pictures of what they built underground after that happened, but they just couldn't stay there. They couldn't stay there, and it was easier for them to come to Earth. And I believe that's what they did. That's what these ancient stories of the Anunnaki are, that they're mostly Martians who were like us. Maybe they were giants, they were bigger. They came to Earth. They were able to work out a thing where they could crossbreed with the Neanderthals that were here, and they ultimately created us, and we're their ancestors. We're their successors. We're their descendants. So, and there's a lot of things about us that say that. I mean, do you know, if you're outside of the Earth's gravitational influence, your circadian rhythms here, biorhythms, are 24 hours. You get up into orbit at the International Space Station, your biorhythms switch to 24.9 hours. Guess what 24.9 hours is? It's the rotational period of 1 day on Mars. So there's something encoded in our DNA that's Martian. So that's what I think happened. And I think that's what a lot of these stories in the Bible about the Ajiji and all these other, the Watchers and all that, that's what all these stories really are telling you. The book of Revelation, I don't think that happened to Earth or is going to happen. I think that's what happened on Mars. The fire, the brimstone, the explosion. They tried to survive, and then they came.
Thank you for saying that, because I can't say I have a Bible background, but I have a religious background.
Right.
And so many of my family and friends, I've always said, if I could read the original in Hebrew, I would read the Bible and take it seriously. However, as an adult, now I question what is original. What is original? And they keep finding over years
new books of the Bible.
Right. What is associated. And it doesn't seem to matter what country it is. But we have to remember that at one time we did not have countries.
The Dead Sea Scrolls and things like that. And again, this is why I think Trump is opening the Smithsonian, because there's stuff in there that's going to tell you what your real history is, what the real history of the United States is, what the real history of the world is, that they found Egyptian artifacts and sarcophaguses in the Grand Canyon, that there's enough gold in the Grand Canyon to make this planet wealthy beyond words. And gold has an intrinsic value as a healing. It has healing properties. It has gold and silver have value in manufacturing in all these different ways. So, I think that's what's going to happen in terms of the Smithsonian being popped open. Is a lot of stuff's going to be exposed. The problem is we haven't had that one moment where we flip into what I call an asymmetric timeline, the timeline where aliens exist, where history is shown to be false, where what's in the Vatican archives is astonishingly weird, that there were aliens fighting wars on Earth, 10,000 years ago. But we just need that one thing, that one domino to flip that timeline open. It hasn't happened yet. I'm still waiting for it.
If people would look, and I picked this up from one of the marvelous shows that you were on. If people would look at artwork, ancient artwork hanging out in the open, the artists have ships with fire, round ships, long ships,
rockets,
people
riding.
Yeah. When during the harmonic conversion, I was in Palenque and had the privilege of being in a Palenque pyramid area overnight. And this is going to sound crazy unless you were part of the witnessing there, but at 10 to 11 o'clock at night, a column of spaceships came out to play, and people from all over the world were there, and they were saying, come down, talk to us, come on. I mean, people were clapping and singing, and yes, the FBI were there, the black suits were there. Could they have been any more obvious? Why did they wear those silly black suits to just, I mean, it was so stupid. They were taking people's cameras away from them. I had people literally, because of where I was standing, literally put it, we didn't have cell phones then. Keep that in mind, public. We only had old-fashioned, still sounds funny to say that, cameras with film, Kodak film in them. I had 3 total strangers, because of where I was standing, hand me rolls of film. And one guy looked so desperate. He said, bury this. I buried it.
Yep.
I don't know if anybody will ever find it. He asked me to do it. I said I would. I did it. The other 2 rolls, I went in to have them developed. I got back nothing but blank.
Yeah. Of course.
And that's another story I could tell you. But what was going on in the heavens was just amazing. Yeah. And the sounds and what happened in Choctaw Canyon, but did not make the front page of what is the magazine that has the yellow trim? Where's my head? It's been around forever. National Geographic. There we go.
National Geographic, right? Okay.
It was yellow, and it had one cover, and it lasted less than 24 hours on the stands, and the government said, "Get them down." The government said that. Yep. Because of the photograph that was on the front. And that was an amazing night with everything that went on. I mean, I don't think there were any of us in our group, and there were about 20 or so that slept. I mean, we didn't sleep for 3 days. We were so wired.
Sounds like a weekend in Vegas. Where I live. I never sleep. Yeah, I do sleep.
I have to say, in my younger days, that would Vegas, that would have been it.
That would have been the case, but yeah,
that would have been the case. I want to go back to you. The suggested title for this was The Physics of Spirituality. How does spirituality fall in with all of this?
Well, okay, so we all know that we're connected to God, Source, Jesus, name your deity, call it whatever you want, right? We all know there's a connection, because if we're open, we've all had moments in life where the only way that could have happened is if someone arranged it, right? Somebody bigger, higher, more powerful than me arranged it. So call it whatever name you want. So there was this girl I was quite infatuated with around 2010. And I was trying to show her a path that was different than what she was on, that was better, that was more spiritual, that was acknowledging of reality, of religion. And, there's all these different pathways you can find it. And, I was very much the scientist, right? And it's really cute because I remember we used to have fights. We used to go back and forth. And I remember one time we had a really bad one. And I finally just said, screw this. It had been months, maybe a year. And I went back to her and saw her. And I told her how I felt about her. And at the time, I didn't really realize I was really in love with her. But I said, look, I care about you. I don't like not having you in my life. I want to fix this. This is how I feel about you. Anyway, so she said, okay. So we went back to go hang out at my place. Nothing like that. There was definitely clear there was not going to be any fooling around going on, but we were gonna spend some time together and talk. And she was following me back to my place, and she said, turn on such and such a station. And I did, and it was playing The Scientist song by Coldplay, right? And I didn't realize then, but the message in that song is let's start over. Let's start over. And I didn't get it. And I thought we were just going to go back to the same kind of fun we were having before. So that ended up being a problem. But I realized she had some spiritual awareness. And I thought, okay, I've got my first book, Dark Mission, is very successful with this other guy. I want to go do my own thing. And I want to make my own mark. What am I going to write about? And what I realized is that embedded in this book that we had written, which was about monuments and pyramids on Mars and the civilization that was there, and how their geometric arrangement implied an underlying physics that was completely different than Einstein and quantum physics and all relativity and all this other crap that's wrong, by the way. I thought, I want to write about that, because not only will I make a name for myself there, and I can work with people more in the spiritual community, I can cross between the alien conspiracy sci-fi community and the spiritual community, but I know she's into this stuff and I can teach her things. So every time as I wrote this book, The Choice is what I called it. I said, what word here would a 25-year-old girl understand? So I did it that way. So I wrote this book, and in the course of researching it, I found out things I didn't even know that were incredible, that indicate that there's this, I call it, Richard Hoagland calls it hyperdimensional reality around us. In other words, that means higher dimensions than this one, but that are connected. Everything that happens in the 3D universe is dictated by the higher universes. Fifth dimension, they say time is the fourth dimension. So a lot of that was about, well, what's the mechanism? Because as you get into it, what you discover is that there are so many things in conventional physics that are just not right, and they're just not explainable. But they are explainable with this other theory, which we got from ruins on Mars. It implies you can have unlimited energy. It implies that you are connected to a higher self. And so I thought, I looked around, nobody's put this together. So let me put this together for everybody and show all these hippies that, all the crystals and all the chanting and all the vibrational stuff, there's actually an underlying physics to that. There's experiments that people don't know about that prove it. And, so I looked at the work of a guy named Jacques Allais, who was a French economist, Nobel Prize winning French economist who liked to play around with physics. Well, what he liked to do is he set what are called free swinging paraconical pendulums during an eclipse in Paris in the 1950s. Now, according to conventional physics, an eclipse has no effect whatsoever on physical reality. Absolutely can't. In Newton's laws and Einstein and all that other crap, right? So he lets this pendulum swing. Now, what will happen with a free swinging pendulum is that if you set a fixed point in space and watch it, is it will actually swing with the rotation of the Earth. And that's explainable through Coriolis effect and various other things that we do understand. During the eclipse over Paris, in his lab, which was basically hermetically sealed, right? The pendulum not only stopped swinging with the rotation of the Earth, it started very rapidly rotating backwards against the rotation of the Earth. And there is nothing in any conventional physics that can explain that. Absolutely nothing. So what it shows is that there was an influence from some sort of higher realm, call it the fifth dimension, that was expressed by the alignments of the planets. Okay, it was because that's what an eclipse is. It's the sun, it's the moon, it's the Earth. How can that be? It can't be if what they teach you is physics in school, what Neil deGrasse Tyson and Carl Sagan tell you is physics, and Einstein tried to tell you, it can't. But yet here it is. And they did other experiments. They proved it over and over again. In 1999, NASA was going to prove the LA effect. They held a bunch of experiments during another eclipse over Europe. And the guy in charge of the experiment stole all the data and disappeared off the face of the Earth because they didn't want you to know what happened in those experiments, right? So then I found out, and this was a help from Richard Hoagland, my co-author on the first book, that there was also experiments done in the 1950s. RCA was trying to figure out, well, we're into radio. RCA was into radio. They were a big corporation, right? But the radio signals were bad when there were sunspots, and they were good when there weren't sunspots. So they're like, what the hell's going on? So they hired this guy, John Nelson, to try to figure this out. Now get this, what he found was that these shortwave radio signals were obviously very, very good when the sun was calm and very, very bad when the sun was all inflamed with sunspots. It was all super active. But what he found out was that if you look at the positions of the planets, especially the so-called gas giants, right? Neptune, Uranus, Saturn, and Jupiter. When they were in certain positions, the sun was calm and the signals were good. When they were in other positions, the sun was fired up and pissed off and the signals were terrible. And then get this, what he said is these positions of the planets correlate to trines and squares and oppositions in astrology. All of these, they're astrological configurations. So when the astrological configuration, a trine is considered good. When you had 3 of these big planets in a trine, everything was good. The sun was calm. The radio signals were good. Everything was beautiful. When they were in a square, which is a negative alignment, or an opposition, which is also negative, the sun was fired up. It was PO'd. The signals were terrible. Again, what this shows is that these planets affected the energetic output of the sun. And there's nothing in any physics that can explain that either, except, well, Richard figured out, that it has to do with what's called bulk angular momentum, spin energy. Because the sun has the biggest mass in the solar system, but it has only about 2% of the spin energy. The spin energy is all in the planets, primarily in the gas giants. So it's this spinning energy that pulls stuff down. The spin pulls down energy from higher dimensions. And as the configuration of the solar system changes, the sun changes, and electromagnetic waves like shortwave radio signals change. Guess what else, Elaine, is an electromagnetic signal?
What?
Every thought you have ever had in your brain in your entire life.
Oh, dear.
So what this proves is that astrology is real.
Yes.
Because the positions of the planets will affect, and the alignments with the solar system and the center of the galaxy and all that stuff, it affects human consciousness. Now, That doesn't mean any particular school of astrology is right or wrong, but the ones that understood the impact of the bigger planets would probably have a better, more accurate understanding of giving you a correct prediction about your future. So that also proves something else, because the only way that your thoughts can be affected by a planet which is 50 million miles away, or 50 billion miles away, even the only way that could affect your thoughts is if the signal is going up and then coming back down to you through your connection to God or Source or Jesus or whoever your chosen deity is. So that proves something else. Proves that heaven exists. It proves that there's another place after this where the energy of our souls must go when our physical bodies die. It has to. So I found these things out and I said, okay, I have to tell the world this. Not that many people seem to want to know, but I tell them any chance I get. So these were extraordinary things that I discovered, in the course of writing this book, all to impress a girl who I didn't impress very much. But
I was going to say, did she read the book, and was she impressed?
I dedicated the book to her. I believe she read it. I'm not sure she read the whole thing, and I think that she's proud of it. I mean, she has it on her public social media, but ultimately it didn't work out for us. So,
But it did work out in the ways that it needed to. You wrote an important book
that not that many people have read. It's my second best-selling book, but still I want more people to read it. So
well, then we have to get it out there. It's called The Choice.
I do think it's time. I do think there will come a time when it will become more important, because
you're on this podcast the first year that it's in existence. We drop a new episode every Friday. That's the effort made by the team. So a lot of people over the next 3 to 4 years will hear you and the other people that have been here. We're growing every month, which I'm very proud to say.
Yep.
We're reaching a lot of people. And my goal with having this podcast really has always been to humanize the people involved in metaphysics. That's why, and spiritual world, whatever your tool is. I don't care what your tool is. I don't care. I don't care. You can read clay. I don't care. It's what's important. To me, it's all about the spirituality. But so often readers are looked at as a little strange, and we're not sure about being friends, and oh my God, and you need to leave the church and all this other crap. We are humans. First of all, we are a spirit in a human body of our choice, having an experience on planet Earth. Mm-hmm. But we are more than that. We also have to live with human challenges. That's part of the lesson. That's
human choices. Human challenges and human choices, exactly.
Right. And that's, Spirit says, or God says, or whoever says, well, if you're going to go to planet Earth, then this is what you got to do in exchange. So our payment to be here on this beautiful planet with other people having this marvelous experience are the challenges, and they're all unique. Mm-hmm. I'm going to share the fact that you are a twin. I would bet that your twin does not walk in the same steps that you do.
No.
Right.
No. But we have a lot in common, a lot of things we both like, but yeah, we're very different.
You're very different. Now, I can't say that every set of twins is going to be like that. I've known twins that might as well be mirror images of each other. They marry this men that look alike, even twins. Mm-hmm. But everybody is different. We have different responsibilities,
right?
Different things we need to learn. And I've always wanted, this podcast was never until 5 years ago called a podcast, because they didn't exist. I had radio shows. It still didn't do what I wanted it to do. I wanted people to recognize that we are human, and we take a risk to share our abilities on assignment or agreement to do so. I happen to think that yours is especially difficult for some of you folks that work in the ET field. Pardon my expression, ET. There's probably another term for what you do. Science, physics.
Same thing.
Right. It's all the same thing. I'm of an older class, so it's ETs for me. But and in fact, one of your statements is where is it? Aliens. I like that. Are real and they are not our friends. Okay, we'll get into that in a minute. But I can't remember not knowing and not, I'm not even going to say believe because I knew it as a child that there were other things besides human. And when I was little, I thought the things were animals because they were different from us. And I was a
Mm-hmm.
kid and I
Mm-hmm.
didn't remember everything that I brought with me. And then as I got older, I would see a human that had this other overlay or aura that looked really different. And I'm going, no, I was about 5 or 6. No, that's different. And at first, seriously, Mike, I thought it was my vision. I truly did because
Yeah.
it was like an overlay. And I talked to mom about it, and she was real quiet. I saw her taking a side eye at my grandmother. So a little bit at a time, sitting on the front porch and sitting because this was country. I mean, there was nothing.
So do you think your mom knew about this kind of thing and knew about aliens and
Oh yeah,
knew about grandma and grandma's crazy had passed that stuff down, but she didn't want you to be
no.
associated with
Well,
it.
for you have to remember, I was a kid. She was an adult. I was born in 44.
Yeah.
And by the time I was 5, we were getting ready to go to Italy in a military. I grew up overseas. Hit Italy for a couple of years, came back for 8 months, went to Germany. I grew up overseas. Much, much more open-minded. Now, we come from country roots where things like this, really believe it or not, were more accepted, more open-minded.
Yeah.
My grandmother could help anybody birth anything. She could do surgery if she had to on the dining room table. I mean, that's how people lived, right,
Yeah.
at that time. And she was extremely psychic. And we lived about a half a mile from her best friend. She came into my bedroom. We were visiting. She scooped me up and she said, "We're going to," and I'm not going to say my grandmother's best friend's name. "We've got to get to her." And I said, "Okay." And believe it or not, she threw me on a horse and off we went. I'm wrapped up in a blanket. We got to the back door of that woman's house and she was dying. She was trying to get to the bell. Now, the bell was by the front door and the back door. Everybody had a bell. If there was an emergency, you rang the bell. That was just the way it went. She had the bell in her hand and she was about to pull it and she froze. She just froze. And my mother got to be with her best friend for about the last less than 5 minutes of her
Wow.
life. Now, how did
Wow.
she know? How did she know? In
Yeah.
the middle of the night. But this is how everybody in the country lived at that time.
Yeah.
So, yes, they knew about this. They saw things in the sky this is a country sky, nothing over 2, 3 stories high, period. And it was okay with everybody. But because I was going to be part of a family going into a more modern world, my mother really didn't want to discuss those things. My grandmother did, thank God. And we talked about it. But I don't think there's ever been a generation alive that has not been aware of what we now call aliens, which
Yeah.
that's almost insulting.
Yeah.
But I've never doubted it. I've never doubted it. And I have to say, and we're not going to go into it. I have had the privilege of acknowledging over the years a number of people that you and I can discuss some other time that have crossed my path. They've always put themselves in front of me. I've never gone looking for them. And even at a psychic fair, there used to be a group that would come in. They were called the Kids of the Night. That was something. They were like, they were not homeless, but they were street kids and adults who took care of them. It was like adults that just took in all the kids and tried to make sure they were fed and they got to school and all that stuff. But we knew who they were.
Yeah.
We knew who they were. So yes, I have never doubted it. So when you say, but they're not our friends, are you talking about different groups?
Yeah, it's interesting. I have someone I'm spending a lot of time with, and she's trying to open my eyes a little bit about, everybody says, oh, well, the pretty ones, the Nordic ones, they're good. And the lizards, the reptilians, they're bad, A lot of them are. But she's like, no, there's good reptilians and there's bad reptilians. There's good Nordics and there's bad Nordics, just like everything. But my point is, we tend to think, people especially who have encounters with them, and Whitley Strieber, I think, is one of the worst of these.
Yeah.
Treat them like they're superior, and they're not. They may have superior technology, but frankly, I think we have technology that pretty closely matches theirs, which we've probably had since 1960. We just keep it secret. We don't let you and me have that technology, but other organizations do. So the thing I try to remind people is, look, first of all, I have a rule in life, which is don't accept any help you didn't ask for. And, oh, we're here to help you. We're here to help you with the next step of your evolution. Oh, really? What's in it for you, Mr. Arcturan? What's in it for you, Mr. Zeta Reticulan? Why would you help us if we didn't ask for it? And we don't seem to need it. I mean, yeah, we got issues on this planet, but we're thriving. We're growing. This planet can probably take 11 billion people and not really have a problem. And that's probably how the human population will peak, unless we get med beds and we start all living longer.
That was another part of the med bed thing I wanted to talk to you about. But
we'll talk about that in a second. But
yeah, another one.
But my point that I always try to say is, why do you assume that they're stronger than us? We're not on their planet, boring out the cornholes of their cows, abducting their people in the middle of the night, doing analysis on them, experimenting with them, doing DNA experiments, crossbreeding themselves with us. We're not doing that. Why? Because we don't need to. We're fine. They're the ones that are here on our planet trying to learn something about us or take something from us that they don't have. That makes them weaker. Whatever their technology is, they are weaker than us. We are special. We are better than them. And that's why they're here. So we should not trust their agenda. If they tell us, oh, no, Jesus isn't real, God's not real, it's all just this multi-level spiritual thing, and, why should we believe them? And that I think is one of the reasons why I'm here, is to talk a little common sense to people when the aliens finally show up. To be one of the guys that says, wait a minute, why are we trusting what these people have to say? And, oh, look at them. They can do magic tricks. They can fly to other planets, which I think we can do too. They can cure our diseases. Oh, well, okay, we're getting pretty good at that too, if we could just get the pharmaceutical companies out of the way. So my thing is, they're weaker than us. And Elaine, what I think it comes down to is, I believe that the reason for conscious existence, the reason why any of us are here in this three-dimensional universe, is to end this lifetime closer to God than when we were born. That's why I think we're here. And I think every species chooses a different path for how are we going to do this. I look at the Greys. They're automatons. They're almost robots. They may be highly intellectual. I believe they chose intellect. They're like the Vulcans on Star Trek. We're going to choose logic and intellect. Well, that didn't work out for you. You're dying. Human beings, we chose free will. And I think that's an exception in the universe. And I believe that these aliens believe that, and free will, I think, is a rare thing in this galaxy, at least. I don't know about the universe, but it's a rare thing in this galaxy. Most alien societies that I understand much about from people who channel them and people who've experienced them are repressive. And I think that they're trying to figure out, our way is dying, so we have to jump onto not their timeline, but their evolutionary line. And the way we're going to do that is with genetics. So they think it's a physical thing. That's why they want to get to our genetics, because they believe that somehow the essence of what makes us special is embedded in our physical DNA. And that's how that, and I think that that's not going to work for them. I think that they're going to try it and it's going to fail because you chose a different path and you chose the wrong path. And, they don't know how to love. I mean, I have a friend, ex-friend who, she told me the story one day, her life's completely normal. She's 20 years old. She wakes up in bed one night, and there's 3 grays at the foot of the bed. And there's an alien baby crucked in her arm that's half and half. And she instantly knows it's mine. And they're watching her trying to figure out like, well, what are you going to do with this baby? They don't know how to love. They don't know how to, they're so separated from God's grace that maybe by their intellect, maybe by their arrogance, maybe by their desire to control. I don't know. All I know is they're here for us. They're not here for the oil. They're not here for the water. They're not here for the air. All that stuff is abundant throughout the universe. They're here for one reason and one reason alone, and that's us. And it's our spiritual essence that they're after. And we should not give that away easily.
Compassion is a word that I've always thought about when I hear about aliens doing stuff and taking stuff and blood and all that stuff.
Yeah.
There's some intangibles and non-scientific things. I agree with you totally. Like love. That is a non-scientific energy.
Yeah.
Psychiatrists can, whatever, laboratories can research it, but it's something you're taught. Feelings are,
but you're not taught that, Elaine. Your feelings can be suppressed. We naturally come into this existence full of love and ready to give love. We're taught to suppress that, or we're taught not to use that, or we're taught sometimes by our life lessons, by abuse or whatever, not to trust that. But I think if we were all left to our own devices, all of us who really have a soul, and there might be some human bodies here, human skin suits that don't really have connection to source, that really aren't souls, but those of us who have them, I think that's a natural state of being. There's a saying I heard once. It was an economic debate, this guy said, capitalism isn't even an ism. It's just what people do naturally if you leave them alone. And I believe the same thing about love. Love is not even really an emotion. It's just what people do naturally if you leave them alone and let them grow in their own way. So that's what I think we're facing. And I think that those that would like to oppress us, that's what they're trying to suppress. And those that would like to steal from us are trying to steal from us. How do we love like you guys do? Because we're on a path to go forward. And many of these alien species are not. They're at dead ends, or they're coming up to a dead end. And so they want to latch on to our bandwagon, which I'm fine with that. I'm fine with putting my hand out and helping you, but it's not okay for you to take. It's not okay for you to manipulate. It's not okay for you to frighten. So that's kind of where I'm at.
Right there. Not okay to frighten, which they do a lot of.
Anything.
Yeah.
There are people I've known abduction experiences, and one of my friends on that show you mentioned earlier, Uncovering Aliens, maybe this is why you mentioned it. It was a great cast. It was a great show. We shot 5 or 6 episodes. They only cut 4. They showed them 33 times and then decided not to go forward with the show because, Hollywood shit, the executives, they all left and the show was expensive. But it should have gone on, but I think part of that was my energy. I think there were forces suppressing my success level in 2013. But one of my co-stars was named Stephen Jones, sweet British gentleman, wonderful guy. And you had me. I was the show's sort of skeptic because I'm very skeptical. We had Maureen, who was, kind of the eye candy, and then we had Stephen and Daryl. Daryl was, the alien is evil. We must chop him up. We must eat him. Eat him like sushi. Tastes like chicken. He had bad experiences with aliens. No question. Bad ones. But Stephen was, the aliens are here to help us in the next step of our evolution. And they're here as our brothers and all this stuff. And And so he was adamant about that. And they were a great choice for the show because they would go back and forth. And man, you should have seen some of the arguments that weren't on camera between us two. It was exciting. It was so, that show had so much potential, and I feel so terrible it didn't go forward. But we were at a house in Michigan, and we were investigating an abduction case. And I was kind of like not believing this guy. And that was kind of my job, was to be the one who questioned. I was the voice of the audience. Is this really real? But Daryl had this thing, and it was like a police sketchbook. You've seen police sketches, right?
Oh, yeah.
And so, you know, he would flip through. He had eyes, and he had noses, and he had mouths and chins. And he would flip through, and people say, no, those are the eyes. So this guy picked a set of eyes. He's like, well, that's the chin and the mouth. Okay. And then he would flip through the noses. And he did. And when he did, it was this praying mantis thing. And this is on film. This is on camera. This is in one of the episodes that actually was broadcast over and over again. You can still find it. I think the episode's called Abductions and Bright Lights, Uncovering Aliens. So go check that out on YouTube. And Steven, Mr. Love and Light, that face of this mantis, praying mantis type alien, scared him so much that he had to get up and leave the room.
Whoa.
He could not be in the same room with it. So he had said previously, all my abduction experiences were beautiful. They were wonderful. Yes, they took DNA, but it was really fun. And, you know, I remember one time he joked, he said, I don't know what you just did to me to extract my sperm, but could you please do it again? You know, because they just put a machine on him he just, you know, can I say that can I say ejaculated? That's how they would take sperm. Okay, I just did. It's too late now. You can cut it out. And everything's peace and love and light. But when he saw that face, it frightened him so deeply. Why? Because he had suppressed the memories of these other beings. And the aliens that abducted him may have been good to him, may have been nice. I believe they had implanted this idea into his head that they were here for the good, because then he would help spread their word and you know, be on their side. And that was important to them, that they have spokesmen with the human race that would support them. But when he saw that mantis thing, and they are universally reviled. When people see them, they hate them. My friend Tom Reed, who has a very famous abduction case, his whole family in the Berkshires in 1969, you know, he's terrified of those things. So they're not all good. And even if they pretend to be good, a lot of times behind them are forces that are not so good, that are either here for some nefarious purpose, they're working for the dark side, Satan, whatever you want to call it, or their own agenda is the only thing that matters to them. And whether any of us live or die or we're wiped out, as long as they get what they want, that's what they care about. So
I'm glad I went back to that. Thank you. That's another way of looking at those beings.
Yeah. And just remember, they're here for their own reasons. They're not here to help us. They're here for their own reasons. Because even if they are here to help us, let's say the Nordics, the Pleiadians are good. Basically, we're here to help you. Maybe that's true. But they're helping us because they want something out of it. They're no different than human beings. Look, there's a girl.
Wait.
There's a girl I really like. This girl I really like. Very smart, very much into this stuff. I would very much like to have something happen between us. But look, as brilliant as she is, and as much as I like to get her information out there, I want her for myself too. You know, everybody has a selfish motivation in everything, every relationship. She's cute, you know. Do I want her to be my girlfriend? You betcha.
You deserve a good, nice girlfriend.
Sure. But what I'm saying is, regardless of what she can contribute to the world of ufology and understanding or whatever it is, I have my own reasons for wanting.
And you're honest about it.
Well, but it's the same thing with the aliens, but they're not honest about it. It's the same thing. That's what I'm trying to get to. Is it's the same thing with them, but they're not honest about it. So somebody has to be out there to say, wait a minute, This book is titled To Serve Man. Remember that episode of The Twilight Zone? To Serve Man. And as all these people are getting on the ship to go to the planet, the guy comes running up and he says, it's a cookbook. So.
That's one of the shows that I saw of that series.
Yeah.
I think I saw one about a man and his glasses.
Oh, Burgess Meredith. Yeah.
Yes.
The nuclear war happens, and he's finally got time to read all the books, and he falls and his glasses break.
Right. And then there was one, God, all those black and white movies. There was one about a dream or something. They were either freezing to death or they were burning up. But at the end of the show, it was the opposite of what she was dreaming.
It was the sun. Yeah, it was the sun was heating. The Earth had moved too close to the sun, and everything was burning up. And everybody was trying to go north to the poles, but eventually we were going to get so close to the sun that the planet was going to die. And she woke up and she'd had a fever, and it was exactly the opposite. The Earth had somehow moved away from the sun, and everything was freezing. Everyone.
And the other one that you mentioned, those were the only three that I ever saw of that series.
Yeah.
But boy, didn't they make an impression?
A lot of Rod Serling is probably the greatest writer of all time, not just of sci-fi and horror, but just brilliant man. Absolutely brilliant guy. Would love to have been Rod Serling in a career.
Tell me the name of your podcast. Don't you have more than one?
I do. I have Real News Live with Mike and Jen. That is my psychic friend, Jennifer Falah. That is focused on the financial reset and geopolitical news and what's really going on. So we try to give you the real news. Like, this is what they say the news is. This is what's really happening, right? This is
not an interpretation of the news.
No, well, no, it is. It is in a sense it's an interpretation, but it's with psychic input from the archangels, who Jen is very connected to, and she has an uncanny ability to be correct. Absolutely, like at least 80%. And she does things like in the news, what you're going to hear about in the news this week, and she usually lists half a dozen items, and at least 4 of them happen. And then sometimes what happens is they do happen, but they don't happen for like 3 months. And like, wait a minute, didn't you say, earthquake in Asia and, or something like that? And then boom, it'll happen. But she'll just see it sooner rather than later. So,
timing, I think I told you this a long time ago. Timing is the hardest thing for psychics to work with.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's time. But it also involves so many people.
Right. And whoever you're talking to up there, their concept of time and how time works up there is completely different. Like Jen got August 23rd, God wins 2 or 3, 4 years ago. Okay. Didn't say which August 23rd, 2022, 2023. Well, guess what? And a lot of this is financial, cryptos and currencies and all that stuff. Guess what? In just a couple days in Jackson Hole, Wyoming, the Federal Reserve is having a major meeting, at which time I understand the question is going to come up of whether we go back to the gold standard or not because of our financial problems. And they finished that meeting on, wait for it, August 23rd. So I will be shocked if there isn't some sort of fairly significant movement in financial circles on August 23rd by whatever announcement the Fed makes.
Okay, say the name of the podcast again.
That's Real News Live with Mike and Jen. That is Mondays and Wednesdays. And then later on tonight at 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern, I have Toxically Masculine Tuesday, which is just me and 3 other dudes. And we again, it's a news show, but it's a more conventional news show. Like I'm sure we'll talk about the summit yesterday, but we'll try to give you a different spin on, well, what do we think's really going on here as opposed to what they're trying to push out in the media? What's really happening with the war in Ukraine and all that stuff. We have that one. And then I do, there's a friend of mine named Mark Z, the original Mark Z. And I do Whiskey and Wisdom with him on Wednesday nights, which is just, again, 3 guys sitting around drinking a little whiskey, telling dad jokes, and I give what they call Mike Bara's bad dating advice on that. But it's not bad. It's actually good. It's funny because the three of us, it's Mark's Z and his son Zester and me, and we were all at a conference in March, right? And I met a very nice young lady there and had a really good time, and we were walking back to my room, and Zester comes walking up, hi, how's it going? One of those, hi, how's it going kind of things. And I said, Zester, you really can't claim that it's bad dating advice anymore, because you now have absolute proof that it works. So that's the thing where I try to give guys advice that I've learned about women, because so many men, especially with the confusion today and about feminism and stuff, I try to explain to them, like, girls are girls, and they're not really different than they used to be. They, they want you to open the door for them. They want you to decide where you're going to eat. They want you to drive. So I try to give guys advice, because guys have become so walking on eggshells around girls that in a lot of cases they don't even talk to girls anymore. And I'm like, that's not what the girls want. So that's kind of a fun show.
At least say hi.
Yeah. Well, how? Yeah, and especially with the robots coming along that are getting more and more realistic, how, if men don't get braver and talk to girls more, how are men going to meet women anymore? It's just going to be, it's bad. Elaine, in some countries it's really bad. Like, Japanese young men just do not go out to bars. They do not try to meet girls. They just sit at home and play video games. So
I saw something on one of the news specials about one of the Asian countries. I can't remember which one. It may have been Japan, and how the birth rates have gone down dramatically.
Japan. It's Japan, because the men won't approach the women anymore. Girls.
I've said for a long time, remember, I'm a totally different generation. I've said for a long time, women, yes, of course, they should say something when a man has been inappropriate, but not to the point of absolutely devastating and killing that person's everything.
Yeah.
But men are so legally afraid now of doing anything.
Yeah, exactly.
Anything.
In the workplace or you used to be able to meet my dad met my mom in the workplace at Boeing, so it becomes a criminalized thing, and it is a problem. And there are men speaking out about it, and letting women know, hey, look, you have to be more approachable. And the problem too is, Elaine, with social media, one of the social problems we have is women can get so much attention from men that their standards for what is an acceptable man have gotten so high that it's like they reject anybody who's just a good guy. And then, after 10 years of these good looking men that they're attracted to, using them and losing them, sometimes they're in their early 30s or mid 30s. They got one or two kids and they're looking for a good guy, and there aren't any around. And it's like, yeah, because you put him in the friend zone 10 years ago. So that's what you wanted. You should have grabbed onto it when you were 25. Now, men honestly look at a woman with a couple of kids by another man as baggage. So it's really hard to cross that divide, which is getting wider.
But you know what? I'm still old-fashioned enough to believe the perfect person for everybody is out there at the perfect time for the perfect reasons. I don't care how many kids there are to raise, because I know women that have married men, a second marriage even. Maybe she didn't have any children with the first one, but have married a man with 3-4 kids of various ages and said, I love the man. I take the whole package.
But I know men. I know men who are just like, oh, she has kids. Okay, I'll date her when she's available, but there's no way I'm going to be serious about her. And so then she wastes a year or two of her life with that guy, and he's never serious. He's not really going to be serious about her, because he's not going to do that. And reprogramming men has failed. We're not going to be reprogrammed. We like what we like. We want what we want, and we're going to do what we're going to do.
Women are the same way these days, honey.
Yeah.
But I still believe the perfect person will come along at the perfect time.
Well, I believe that you have several perfect persons that come along at different times.
Yes, depending on your lifespan. Yeah.
Depending on what lesson you have to learn at that particular moment.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So, so anyway, that shows fun because people kind of give me a hard time about it. I'm like, well, on the other hand, I'm doing okay. I do okay with the ladies, but have I met anybody else I'd be interested in marrying? Well, not until recently, but that's a long way off,
Well, we'll hope that works for you, sweetie.
Well, I never really thought I'd feel that way again. I really thought I'm just going to date and have have relationships, but they're not going to get really serious again. And you find out you can meet somebody.
Again, those are feelings that you don't, I almost said don't have any control over, but I have known people that have completely ignored their feelings and just gone on with life out of fear for one reason or another.
Yeah.
And I get it, but I still go back to, if you're supposed to be together, nothing's going to stand in the way.
Well,
even if you have to circle back,
we all have free will. We all have free will. We do. We all have free will. So I think you have multiple contracted opportunities, but that person can still choose not to fulfill the contract.
Not to do it this lifetime. But eventually it has to happen. Some lifetime. I want to go back to something I wanted to say a while ago. I have heard over and over and over again in meditations, in readings, in just the thought pattern that Earth is the most difficult planet to live on in a skin for all of its challenges. And if I've always heard that if you can survive, learn and teach, and no matter how bad you may be a serial killer, but there are still lessons there. There's still reasons that's an example of what other people hopefully will not be. If we can survive planet Earth and prove ourselves as a teacher and a learner, we have truly accomplished a major growth pattern just by simply being on Earth, even if it's just to take 5 or 6 breaths, because the people in the hospital, the parents, everybody have experienced something and they needed to learn about life. I know that may sound horrible to some people, but it's not easy to live on planet Earth. It isn't.
You touched on what I think is one of the most underrated things about being human. And, I hear people say, oh, get me off this planet. These people are messed up. They kill each other over whose deity it is, or they kill each other over oil, or they kill each other over money. And, look at how terrible these people are and human beings are. And I think nothing could be further from the truth. I think it takes an incredible amount of courage to incarnate here on this planet in this experience, totally cut off by the time we're 3 or 4 years old from our higher selves, from our higher source, from our higher guidance, and with complete amnesia as to what exists beyond this world. How different would we all behave if we all knew what happened when we passed away and we weren't afraid of it? We would behave completely differently. So to incarnate here in this human experience is the bravest thing I think that any soul can do. And that's why I think this planet is special. I think human beings are special. And I think that the worst person is a creature of nobility for having come here to experience this. Because don't kid yourself, okay? Hitler and Stalin and Mao and Genghis Khan, they have a lot of karma to clear. But they were brave enough to come here and do what the plan wanted them to do. And they're paying for it. And they're going to pay for it. And that takes courage. That takes admiration. I don't care who it is. So the worst person in your life is a creature of nobility, a soul of nobility. And you should go through life appreciating that, because so are you.
With respect, a certain amount of respect. I agree with you 100%. One of these days, ask me behind the scenes about my Genghis Khan person. And I'll share a story with you. And on that note of curiosity, we're going to thank the wonderful Mike Bara. I've kept you for a very long time on purpose because I know how busy you are, and I know how we tried twice now to get him on here.
Yeah.
And this is, so I was going to take every minute I could squeeze out, which was almost 2 hours. So I appreciate you. However, I have a half a page of notes that when I can twist your arm to come back again, I'd like to continue the conversation.
Sure.
It would be fun.
I'd love to. I'd love to come back. So let's do it again.
Thank you so much. I know you've got your podcast. Now that I know the names of them, I will look them up on, and you also have things on YouTube.
Oh yeah, Mike Bara 333 on YouTube. That's where all the podcasts go, and also lots of videos, UFO cases I've investigated, things I've exposed, people who really aren't telling you the truth about UFOs, and also cases that I think are very exciting, very provable, very interesting stuff. So Mike Bara 333, and then the Rumble channel is Real News Live with Mike and Jen, and then my website is mikebara.blogspot.com, or just type in mikebara.com. It'll go right there.
All kinds of stuff will show up.
All kinds of stuff, links to my books, links to lectures I've done, lots of cool stuff. Yeah.
Speaking of books, do you already have your next one outlined in your head?
My next one I would call either The Secret History of the United States or Ancient Aliens and the Deep State. However, what I'm planning to put into it, I was told you can publish that, but you'll be dead in 3 months if it comes out and people start reading it. I really want to tell people about how money really works and the monetary. My philosophy, Elaine, is everything in geopolitics is money or aliens. Okay. So it's either money or it's aliens or it's both. And there's certain truths that I don't think the world's quite ready for, but I want to talk about, and I will talk to you about them in arenas where I'm not going to be seen widely. So I want to write that. I want to write that book, but I've been told it would be dangerous, and I don't think the world's quite ready for it, but it may be ready. Maybe next year it'll be ready for that. So I don't really have another book project.
I got within 5 years.
Okay. Within 5 years.
Within 5 years.
That's kind of my timeline too.
Well, it doesn't mean you can't be writing it now. That doesn't mean it has to be published right now, but you could be working on it and still make revisions as things change.
Well, I find these days that video is the best way to communicate right now. And that's what I'm doing more of rather than the written word. So
you're such a good writer.
Well,
not that you're not a good video person.
Some people don't think so. I will write again, but
do a novel.
I'm doing a little. I mean, look, Elaine, look, to do this next book. I mean, one of the things I have to research and put into a book that in an entertaining way is the exact movements of the British Army in Washington, D.C. in the War of 1812, because that's really important. You think that's exciting to get up? Oh boy, I can't wait to write about the War of 1812. No, it's not exciting, but that's the thing about a book is it's critical context. Whereas critical to have context. Whereas with these kinds of things, you can just hit the highlights. And so, I'm trying to improve my communication skills in that area.
I'm just so glad that this podcast was, like I said before, I had radio shows before, but this as being a podcast took so long to happen because it didn't exist.
Right. And this can be a podcast. You can just take the audio file and upload it to all the podcast platforms, and people that want to listen in their cars can listen to it in their cars.
Right.
It doesn't have to be a video.
I'm ready for another novel from you, which you could take all kinds of your good stuff.
Well, I have that one. I have that one written. However, it is very different from the first one, and it's very dark, and it's very, it's very intense, very extreme. And I'm not sure I want to show the world that side of me yet. We'll see.
Honey, if Steve what's his name can do it.
Well, it's kind of Ancient Aliens meets, Twilight meets 50 Shades of Grey. Okay, so it's not.
Honey, I want to read that.
Yeah, it's pretty. Well, look, it's funny because I've given it to some women because I want to see how women react to it, right? I've given it to some women that are like, wow, that first couple of chapters was kind of intense. And I'm like, yeah. But it, fascinatingly, Elaine, that story, it was one night with the girl that I wrote the choice for. I was just really having a hard time with where we were at. And I came home and I was drinking and I was like, God, I looked up and I said, you got to give me something here. I need something because this where I'm at right now is killing me. And that night I dreamed this dream. And in the dream was this entire story. And I think it was probably a past life of hers and mine, but it was like a metaphorical past life. But they gave me the whole story. I woke up, I turned on my voice memo, kept my eyes closed so I was in that half dream state so I could remember, dictated the whole thing, got up the next day and wrote it. So that's where that came from. So I had to take no responsibility. It's God's story. It's not mine.
I was going to say, you asked, you received. Now you have the responsibility of doing something with the gift.
I've tried to do something with it, but we'll see if I put it out there. It's
doesn't have to be
immediate. Just remember, Elaine, if you do want to read it and I do send it to you, there's one thing you have to keep in mind through everything you read. It's a love story. It's actually a love story. Okay.
Got it.
No matter what's happening on the page in front of you, keep it in your brain. This is actually a love story.
That should be on the front of the book.
Well, I actually put in
a love story.
I just gave it to a friend. Who's into all those different kinds of books. And I just gave it to her to read it. And I put in a new tag, the author's note. Please keep in mind as you read this, that this is a love story. And you may you're not going to see the love at the beginning. You're not going to see the love in the middle. Hopefully you will see the love in the end. You'll understand.
So you could put that in the very first. They could open the book and they're
that's what's going to be there because that's my disclaimer. So yeah, I'm kind of sitting on that one. Waiting for the right time. The universe has told me it's not quite the right time for that one yet. But let's see.
I agree with that. The world. Okay. What is the gray thing? It's already out there. So that's not a big shock, but perhaps when it's mixed with some other things, it could be for some folks.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. And I'm going to have to let you go.
All right.
I cannot tell you how much I've enjoyed our conversation. I will have faith that we will have another one in the next couple of months as time allows, because we're going to have to pick up where we left off. But like I said, I've got all kinds of notes here. Can you see this?
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, I promise I'll come back. We'll do it again.
Promise accepted. Thank you so much, Mike Bara. You folks out there, go look for his work. As you can tell, he's well worth the search. Thank you so much, Mike.
Bye-bye,
Take care, hon. Bye-bye.
Thank you for tuning into The Conversations with the Ancients, where we take you on a journey where you'll hear voices of metaphysicians from the past, as well as today's spirit mediums, healers, and others who show you a side of the paranormal you've never seen before. Remember to visit our website at conversationswiththeancients.com and enjoy even more great episodes like this one. Again, while you're here, subscribe to us via your favorite network. We look forward to seeing you next time on Conversations with the Ancients.